Recording in progress.
Hello everyone. So today we will start to discuss about the things in this GCSE Biology 9-1. So we will use this as a guide or we will use it as a framework in order to guide us along the lessons. So according to the specifications, I will cover up the topics that we have to discuss, right? Hari. So since I have given an introduction on the first day, today I will continue with the lesson. As the first unit, we have to discuss about organisms and their life processes, right? Organisms and their life processes. Organisms and their life processes. Right. So here actually first of all we should have an idea about the concept of the cell. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life, right? Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life, right? So we'll say the cell, it is the basic structural and functional unit of life. That means if the organism is either unicellular or multicellular, their bodies are made out of a basic unit which is known as the cell, right? If it is a unicellular organism, its whole body is a single cell. If it is a multicellular organism, what happens? Yes, there are a large number of cells, but once again, if we go to the basic building unit of that multicellular organism, that is a cell, right? So the concept of the cell is important. We will discuss about the structure of the cell. Before that, based on the number of cells in living bodies, we can divide the organisms. As I told earlier, they can be divided into two categories, unicellular and multicellular organisms. So we'll mention that also. Unicellular as well as multicellular organisms. Unicellular and multicellular organisms. Unicellular and multicellular, right? So if we give examples for this, if we give examples for unicellular organisms, we can say about bacteria, all are unicellular. Then we can identify certain organisms like Chlamydomonas, which is a unicellular algal variety, Chlamydomonas, right? Then we can mention about amoeba, which is a protozoan, right? There are different groups of organisms. Then we can mention about paramecium, Once again a protozoan, then there is another protozoan known as euglena. Right? These are some of the examples for unicellular organisms, right? Then when it comes to multicellular organisms, we all are multicellular organisms, so you can mention about plants and animals and some of the microorganisms which we consider the fungi. There are unicellular varieties as well as multicellular ones, right? The algal varieties. And there are so many. All plants and animals are considered to be multicellular, right? Their bodies consist of large number of cells. So, if I show you something related to unicellular and multicellular organisms, first of all take this down. Right, then we will watch something related to these unicellular and multicellular organisms and about the concept of cell.
ජීවිතේ කාගේ අපගේ තෝරා ගැනීමවල ප්‍රතිඵලයයි. පාසල් පාවා නාමය තෝරා ගැනීම හරියට ඒ වගේ. නිවැරදි දේ හරියටම තෝරාගෙන. DSI Super Sport. Name original පාසල් පාවා.
Hello, welcome to Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about unicellular and multicellular. Multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms have only one cell. Unicellular organisms can be both eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Bacteria are unicellular organisms that are prokaryotic. They do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Euglena and parameciums are unicellular organisms that are prokaryotic and have a nucleus. Let's look at some examples. Some unicellular organisms live in extreme environments like hot springs and the stomach of a cow. Multicellular organisms have 2 or more cells. All multicellular organisms are prokaryotic. Some examples are frogs, dogs, and humans. All multicellular organisms start as a single cell. As this cell multiplies, the cells start to specialize into different types of cells. For examples, in humans, the cells become tissues. Tissues organize into organs. Organs organize into organ systems, and organ systems create organisms. In summary, unicellular have 1 cell, multicellular have 2 or more. Thanks for watching. Mumu Math uploads a new math video.
Right. Then we have to discuss about the living characteristics. What are the living characteristics exhibited by the organisms? Why do we call them as living? How do we differentiate them from the non-living, right? So the living characteristics, right? Okay, we'll see the living organisms. What are the characteristics of living organisms? So can you mention some of them? Can you send them to the chat? Yes. Yes. Okay. So how do we differentiate the living from the non-living, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, some of you have added the facts. Good. After this one, I will discuss them with you.
Our planet is filled with life. From the smallest bacteria to the largest whales. Despite their incredible diversity, all living things share certain fundamental characteristics that set them apart from the non-living world. Let's explore the amazing characteristics of life. 1. Life needs energy and resources. All living things require energy to fuel the processes that keep them alive. This energy is obtained from various sources. Animals, like this hungry cheetah, are consumers. They obtain their energy by consuming other organisms, like plants or other animals. Fungi, such as mushrooms, obtain their energy by decomposing dead organisms and absorbing nutrients from them. Plants, like the sunflower, are producers that harness energy directly from the sun through the process of photosynthesis. This captured solar energy is the foundation of nearly all life on Earth. 2. Life is composed of cells. If we zoom in on any living organism, we discover its fundamental building blocks. Cells. Cells are the smallest units of life, acting as tiny factories where all the vital processes of life occur. Some organisms, like bacteria, are unicellular, consisting of just one cell. Others, like animals and plants, are multicellular, composed of millions or even trillions of cells working together. Regardless of their complexity, all living things are built from these essential units of life. 3. Life responds and adapts to its environment. Living things are exquisitely tuned to their surroundings. They constantly interact with their environment, responding to changes and adapting to survive. Organisms detect and respond to stimuli, such as changes in light, temperature, or the presence of predators. These responses are crucial for survival. Over long periods, populations of organisms may evolve adaptations, specialized traits that make them better suited to their particular environment. For instance, a polar bear's thick fur is an adaptation for the frigid Arctic climate. 4. Life grows and develops. All living things grow and develop throughout their lives. Multicellular organisms increase in size and complexity by increasing the number of their cells through cell division. Unicellular organisms grow by expanding the size of their single cell. Development involves a series of changes in an organism's form and function over time. And finally, 5. Life reproduces. Life creates more life. All living things are capable of reproduction, the process of creating offspring. This ensures the continuation of their species. Reproduction can be as simple as a single cell dividing into two, or as complex as the elaborate mating rituals of some animals. From the microscopic to the macroscopic, from the mundane to the magnificent, these characteristics unify all living things on Earth.
Okay, so accordingly and according to the facts that you have sent me, we can just list out the characteristics of living organisms, right? Characteristics of living organisms. Okay, what are the characteristics of the living organisms? Hi, so you have sent me, actually they need nutrition, right? They need nutrients. The process from which they obtain nutrients is known as nutrition, right? Nutrition. And by means of nutrition, actually they obtain the materials. So these materials get digested and the digestive end products are absorbed into the bloodstream if we consider about multicellular organisms like us. So even the unicellular organisms, they have different feeding mechanisms. Now in the case of plants, plants have the ability to photosynthesize, right? Plants have the ability to photosynthesize. So they are known as autotrophs. Plants, they are known as autotrophs, right? Because they have the ability to synthesize food by their own. Right? So the process by which they produce food is known as photosynthesis. Right? Then in the case of animals, what do? Yes, animals are known as heterotrophs or heterotrophic organisms. Animals, they are heterotrophs. They cannot produce their own food. They depend on the food synthesized by the plants directly or indirectly. If it is a herbivore, it depends directly on the plant materials. If it is an omnivore, we'll say, if it is an omnivore, it indirectly depends on omnivores may be depending directly or indirectly, but when it comes to the carnivores, they don't depend on plant materials directly, but they depend on another herbivore. So they are depending on plants indirectly. For example, now if we take a food chain, we'll say, use another color, grass is eaten by, we'll say, the deer, right? Then that is eaten by the tiger, right? So here the deer is a herbivore, tiger is a carnivore, right? So deer depends on grass, the plant material directly, and the tiger depends on grass indirectly, because the tiger depends on the deer depends on grass. Therefore, tiger depends on grass indirectly. So the animals depend directly or indirectly on plant materials. Okay. Hi. So that is the first living characteristic that we have mentioned. Then after obtaining the materials into the body by means of nutrition, we need to, what do we need? We need to, yes, obtain energy. Now we say that by eating we get energy. Actually, once we eat, the food gets digested and the digestive end products are absorbed into blood. Then how do we get energy? We get energy by means of cellular respiration, right? So during cellular respiration, the digestive end products, which were resulted by means of nutrition, react with oxygen, producing energy, right? That is known as respiration, right? Respiration actually release the energy from food. Respiration release the energy from food. Respiration, that is another living characteristic, right? It releases energy from food. Energy from food. Releases energy from food. Right. Hi. You can take the first two characteristics, then we will mention some more. Okay. Then the next living characteristic, we can mention about excretion. Now, the waste materials produced during the metabolic processes should be removed from the body. The waste materials produced during the metabolic processes should be removed from the body. That is known as excretion. Right? Hi. So, as the third one, we can mention about excretion. You can write the third one. Excretion. There you can say the waste materials produced during metabolic processes, are removed from the body, Right. Then as the fourth one, you can say, once we come up with a change in the environment, what we call as a stimulus, we are capable of responding to that stimulus, right? Now, once we hear a particular sound, we just turn around to what it is, right? So, sound is the stimulus. It is the change in the environment which was strong enough to come up with a response in our body. So, our response is turning around, right? So, that ability to respond to stimuli is there for living organisms, right? We have 5 senses to perceive the stimuli, and we give out the responses by using either muscles or glands, right? Okay, so as the next living characteristic, we can mention the ability to respond to stimuli. Stimuli is plural, stimulus is singular, right? The ability to respond to stimuli. Ability to respond to stimuli is known as, you don't need to say it is known as, the ability to respond to stimuli. So, within brackets, you can say stimuli are the changes in the environment. Stimuli are the changes in the environment that become sensitive to our sensory organs. Then, the living organisms have the ability to move. Movement is another living characteristic. Even the plants show movements. The plants shoot, grow towards sunlight. The shoot bends towards light, right? So, that is a plant movement. The root system grows towards the ground and they grow in search of water. Right? These are plant movements, right? Some of the plants show sleeping movements even, right? Then in the case of if we say the animals, they can move from one place to another, which we call as locomotion. So, movement is a characteristic of living organisms. So, they show movements in order to fulfill their basic requirements, sometimes in order to find shelter or protection, in order to be protected by their predators, in order to find their food, in order to catch the prey maybe. Right? They show certain movements to fulfill their basic requirements. So, animals have the ability, it's not the animals, the organisms have, the living organisms have the ability to move. In the case of Animals, that is due to the action of muscles. Due to the action of muscles. Then plants show growth movements. Plants show growth movements, slow growth movements. They don't have that much of rapid growth rate. So they show slow growth movements. Hi. Then we have the ability, the living organisms have the ability to control the internal conditions, right? For example, if we take the blood glucose level, then the body temperature. So these are some of the factors which are maintained at an optimum level. We call this as homeostasis. Maintenance of the internal environment of the body at an optimum level. Maintenance of the internal environment of the body at an optimum level, right, Harry? So you can mention that also. They can control the internal environment. In other words, we call this as homeostasis. Maintenance of the internal environment at an optimum level. Maintenance of the internal environment of the body at an optimum level. Right. Then reproduction. So for the continuation of a species, reproduction is something essential for the continuation of the species, right? So the parental organisms produce offsprings in order to continue the species, right? Reproduction is also a living characteristic. Then finally we can mention about growth and development. Growth and development. Growth and development. Now the growth occurs. Growth occurs as a result of, the growth occurs as a result of cell division. Sometimes there is a single cell. There is a single cell, right? So that single cell divides. In order to have a number of cells. So we all have started as a single cell. Last week I explained how the fertilization occurs and how the zygote is formed, the single cell with a diploid genetic composition, and this single cell divides by means of mitotic cell divisions. That is how the growth occurs. And development, this includes cell differentiation as well. Now in multicellular organisms, when there is a cluster of cells, these cells should be differentiated into different types of cells. That means there are nerve cells or the neurons, blood cells, muscle cells. Likewise, there are different types of cells in the body. So the cluster of cells which had a common origin should be differentiated into different types of cells, right? So that is what we call as differentiation. And growth, development, cell differentiation, all these are associated. As a result of growth, what happens? The size of the organism increases. Size, height, the amount, all these are increased. That is an irreversible increase in the dry mass, right? Dry mass. So under growth and development, you can say the size of the organism increases. Size of the organism increases. And also the complexity. and also the complexity. For that, they obtain the materials from the food that they intake. For that, they obtain the materials from the food that they intake. Hi. So today we just gave an introduction about the structure, not the structure, we didn't reach the structure of the cell yet. We identified the cell as the basic structural and functional unit of life. And we mentioned about the characteristics of living organisms. Right. So next time we can continue with the structure of the cell, the structure of a typical plant cell as well as the animal cell, and what are the cellular organelles, right? Okay.